Hello, YouTube. We're back here again doing another Nerd Report. And on today's Nerd Report docket, we got T-Mobile coming back up on the stage. But is T-Mobile back up on the stage in a good light? In the article today basically is, do they deserve a little more scrutiny and be a little bit more judgmental against what they've been doing? But before we get into it, please hit like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and also stay for the story. So, a little bit of backstory before I get started. I do like T-Mobile as a carrier. Granted, I pay all three because I do testing. I drive around, test all the networks. A majority of my personal lines are on T-Mobile, where my test lines are Verizon and AT&T. So some people might say that my viewpoint might be a little biased, but I kind of like the underdog. That's kind of how I've always been, and I've seen T-Mobile kind of grow over the handful of years. So looking at these articles as is makes it a little hard to kind of understand why the people at Phone Arena had what they had to say about T-Mobile. So in this one, they said almost everybody is blaming Mike Sievert for T-Mobile's downfall, and then it says, wait, what downfall? But if you been following the industry for a while, you get a good idea about how and what direction T-Mobile's been going in. You know, I've been looking at it more along the lines of like a teenager kind of growing up to a pre-adolescent adult to having to try to make sure that they become a full-fledged adult. And T-Mobile's kind of been growing in that direction. So, like, underneath, John Legere, a lot of people came on, they felt great. You do Dumb and Dumber, and basically you gen up and be totally different than what anybody's ever done as a CEO. Those things were always good. They were funny. I didn't even necessarily join T-Mobile because of John. I thought that he was just being kind of like overly boisterous. But looking at how T-Mobile was moving and how much they were moving faster than at the time I had Sprint, you really could see that they really wanted to make a better network. But the problem was, it always came back around to assets. You only had but so much. And, it kind of showed itself after the merger happened in 2020, that once T-Mobile absorbed Sprint, that you could tell that T-Mobile had to move fast to kind of get ahead of a lot of issues. So, long and short of it, moving from John Legere to Mike Sievert was more along the lines of growing up. I don't necessarily think that John was a bad CEO. I just think that for the time that he was coming up as a CEO, he had to put, T-Mobile in a more favorable light. That's kind of how I've been looking at it. So, like, part of this article is like kind of being more realistic. If you think that John wouldn't have raised prices, you're being naive. So a lot of this does revolve around raising prices. And as a person who's a network enthusiast, and I like to understand how these networks work, you have to put money behind it to get a better product. And the only logical way of doing it was to raise prices. Do I like the idea that my prices got raised? No. Who walks around and goes, man, I really want my prices raised? No, nobody. But understanding that today's climate, especially in the cellular side, has been more and more leaning towards competition, because Underneath the old side, which when John Legere was head of T-Mobile, basically it was 4 carriers, 2 at the bottom, 2 at the top. And the 2 at the top, being Verizon and AT&T, did not care about consumers' mindset at all. Now they're starting to care. They're giving better deals out. They're hustling a little more. Even Verizon, which I Verizon always rubbed me the wrong way, but even Verizon has moved their ship more towards the consumer and away from the business as much as they've been trying to push. They still want to be considered the premium brand, but they are looking and pushing to be a lot more consumer friendly as of late. Now, moving the ship as slowly as a T-Mobile, moving the ship as slowly as a Verizon has been doing, does it really benefit them as much? Not really. They still want to be considered the premium brand, but at the same time, they don't want to offer better deals than T-Mobile, which that is what the gist of Mike Sievert's been doing with T-Mobile up to this point. And before he hands the baton off, is he the bringer of death to a T-Mobile, or has he just navigated the waters very well to give it to somebody else? That's kind of how I look at it. You don't want to get ahead and be so far ahead, but you also don't want to get to the place where you forget where you come from. And I think that what we're seeing right now is a maturing company going from Dumb and Dumber to, hey, we are neck and neck with our competition, and we can compete on anything and everything that they can do. And I think that that's going to be great as a person who wants to see these networks be full-fledged, pull out all the stops when it comes to 5G, all the, network enthusiast mindset, anything that has to do with AI. I want to see what they're going to do with it. AI in the network. We're talking about being able to, do better beamforming, better hardware across the board. And these are the things that, me personally, I want to see a T-Mobile actually starts propelling themselves higher and higher in. And I don't want to see them rest on their laurels. As a testing T-Mobile's network, I do see that it looks like they're slowing down drastically, but it could be just, hey, we've done a lot of work. Let's see what our fruits of our labor is. But I don't necessarily think that Mike Sievert is to blame for anything that's going on with T-Mobile currently right now. Now, people are obviously going to come into the comments and say, oh, man, I can give you a laundry list of everything that's wrong with T-Mobile right now. And I would love to read your laundry list. I would love to see what somebody else might think outside of my personal like of the company. I think that I have more against a AT&T and a Verizon than I do for a T-Mobile, where AT&T is taking services away and try to resell it back to me as premium, and then Verizon tries to say, hey, we're so great in our network that you should just pay us top dollar because we're so great. That's not how I look at it. If I'm gonna get, I want better service at a reasonable price. And if T-Mobile can continue to offer that, then I'm on board. I'm gonna be all in on it, me per se. But I'm curious to see where you, the consumer, stands at with this. Do you think that it's time for you to brace yourself? Like it says here in the article, brace yourself for even worser days. There are things that T-Mobile's been tinkering with that I might not gravitate towards as much, because I live in a city and I live, city limits. City limits give you a different perspective versus living in the country. They're trying to do away with a lot of stores and moving towards all app. Is that a good direction? Is that a bad direction? These are the things that I would like to hear from people about. Do you think that going all in on the app is going to be the best move for a T-Mobile? Or do you think that going still offering stores in rural America is going to be the best way forward? I think they're going to end up doing a more hybrid approach, because it's kind of like preparing for the future, but also keeping a foot in the past. That's kind of how I look at it. But what say you? Leave your comments below in the comment section and let me know what you think. I'm curious to see what you might end up leaving. But like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Do you think that T-Mobile deserves a little more scrutiny? Do you think that Mike Sievert has led them astray? Has led them down the wrong path? Point them into the wrong direction? These are the questions that I ask amongst the cellular community. This is just one of the things that a lot of people talk about, and I'm curious to see what the mindset of everybody is. But thank y'all for watching. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and y'all have a good one.